Hi, this is Nate, and today we are going to be reading Chapter 42, Aloha Oi. Mark Twain called them the loveliest fleet of islands that lies anchored in any ocean. He was talking about the Hawaiian Islands, which are moored in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But the first American missionaries to the islands, led by Hiram Bingham of Vermont and Asa Thurston of Massachusetts, didn't see loveliness. They came to save souls and were horrified by what they found. The appearance of destitution, degradation, and barbarism among the chattering and almost naked savages was appalling, wrote Bingham. It was March 30th, 1820, and Hawaii would never be the same again. The islands are actually mountains, volcanic mountains, built up from the sea bottom, poking above the water like a crescent of jewels in the enormous Pacific. They included 8 major islands and 124 islets. Polynesian sailors discovered them long before Magellan set sail, maybe 1,000 years before. How they did it is still a mystery. The Polynesians came from the Marquesas Islands, more than 2,000 miles away, and they had no compasses or maps or sextants. Before we move on to the next page, we have a box here, and it says, Aloha is a traditional greeting in the Hawaiian language. And then we also have a picture down here, and it says the Na Pali coast of Hawaii. So, moving on to the next page. But they were skilled navigators, and they traveled back and forth across a vast triangle of ocean, from New Zealand to Tahiti to Easter Island to Hawaii. For those long voyages, they lashed together 2 huge canoes, using cords made from coconut fiber, and rigged them with sails woven of leaves. Some of their vessels had 200 people, held 200 people. The Polynesians settled the islands and, for about 900 years, kept in contact with their home islands. Then the voyages stopped. Those who had come to Hawaii were on their own. By this time, powerful chiefs and priests were ruling what was a feudal society. Just as in Europe, the feudal lords bickered and fought in brutal wars that were often over land rights. But fighting was only one part of the story. The Hawaiians developed a rich oral culture. There was no written language that passed on myths, historic tales, and practical knowledge. On irrigated plantations, they grew taro, an edible root, and cultivated groves of coconut and banana trees. The Hawaiian religion was centered on a system of taboos. These were complicated rules of daily life that couldn't be broken. If you did break a kapu, you were insulting God. That usually meant death. And before we move on to the next page, we have a picture up here, and it says Kilauea, part of the series of volcanoes that formed the Hawaiian Islands, erupts frequently. And then we also have a box right here, and it says, the name Hawaii is sometimes written with an apostrophe between the 2 I's. This reflects the native pronunciation of the word. The simplest way to describe it is that it sounds like a slight pause or hesitation. Hawaii. Both spellings are correct. The spelling here is Hawaii, without the apostrophe. Kaiulani is the way a Hawaiian princess's name is often written. So, moving on to the next page. The first European to discover the Hawaiian Islands was said to be a 16th century Spanish explorer, but he didn't leave a written record of that contact, so he doesn't get credit. England's Captain James Cook does. It was 1778, and Cook was looking for a northwest passage through the American continent. He sailed up the west coast of North America. When he reached Icy Cape in the Bering Strait, he turned south. He needed supplies and food. That's when Cook ran into those gorgeous islands. He named them the Sandwich Islands, after a British aristocrat, the Earl of Sandwich, who was helping to pay the bills for his trip. At first the Hawaiian people thought Captain Cook was a god. They treated him with awe. But that soon changed to anger after fighting began between sailors and natives. The details of what happened are still disputed, but not the outcome. Captain Cook was killed. The outside world now learned of the Hawaiian Islands. Ships soon came calling. In the Hawaiian Islands they could find food, wood for ship repairs, and a place to rest. New England whalers began to spend their winters in Hawaii. Merchants vied for the island's rare sandalwood, which was prized in China. It was soon depleted. Fur traders on their way to Asia made Hawaii a stopping point. The greatest of Hawaii's rulers was Kamehameha I. Using guns and persuasion, he united the islands by 1810. A shrewd businessman, Kamehameha promoted trade with the foreigners and earned a fortune for his kingdom. He paid attention to the new ideas the foreign sailors brought with them, but he also guarded and encouraged traditional Hawaiian ways. When Kamehameha died in 1819, his son, Liholiho, succeeded him. Liholiho became Kamehameha II, but he was a weak king, and often drunk. It was his mother who held real power. She wanted to end the kapu system. The kapus kept Hawaiians fearful, and kept women subservient. Men and women were not allowed to eat together. The Queen Mother planned a big official dinner. Foreign guests were included. Kamehameha II sat down between his mother and another royal female. The king began to eat. The woman ate too. So up here we have a picture, and this caption says, English Captain James Cook presents sheep and goats to Hawaiian natives. Peaceful relations soon turned violent, and Cook was killed. Sandalwood is yellowish and aromatic, and especially fine for carving and making furniture. It produces an oil used in some perfumes. Sandalwood trees, there are several varieties, are native to tropical Asia.